Hello and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we'll get introduced with a new data type called tuple. Okay, so tuple. Tuple is very similar to lists, right? Tuples are also comma separated elements enclosed within brackets, right? Now, how can comma separated elements enclosed within brackets a tuple? Now, that's a list, right? In list, we enclose the elements or items in square brackets. But in tuple, we write elements in round brackets or parentheses, right? Item 1, comma item 2, and so on and so forth. So the bracket is the difference between list and a tuple while creation. All right. So it is a sequence or group of sequence of items as a collection. Like how list is a sequence of elements or items in a collection, comma separated, enclosed within round brackets, square brackets. Tuples are sequence of items as a collection. Comma separated items are there in pair of inside or enclosed within the pair of parentheses or round brackets. So what is there that we need tuples now? We have lists already which can store elements of any data type. Can tuples store elements of any data type? The answer is yes. That is also the similarity between tuple and list. Now, apart from creation of a tuple, usage of the brackets, what is the major difference between tuple and list? In tuples, we used append function, remove function, extend, insert, pop functions. What are these functions? These functions are for adding and removing of elements from a list, right? Insert, extend, and append add elements to the list, and pop and remove, delete elements from the list. Also, we have reverse function to reverse the elements of the list, sort function to sort the elements of the list, and it changes the list, right? All these operations are modifications on the list. But that's where the difference comes into picture between list and a tuple. We do not have any of these functions in tuples. We cannot modify the tuple. We cannot extend a tuple. We cannot add elements to our tuple. We cannot delete any elements from a tuple. When we create a tuple, the elements are fixed. Now, where do we use list and where do we use tuples? Right? Tuples can be used. Can you think of an example where tuples can be used over lists? Now, one example could be storing the elements in a tuple wherein we are storing, let's say, the months of the year. Now, what are the months? January, February, March till December. Can we change, or ideally, logically, is there a possibility of changing that? No, right? Maybe there's a spelling mistake or something of that sort, but do we need to add anything to it? No, right? There will be no 13th month, right? If you have to write the months of the year, you will write January to December, which is 12 months. Similarly, Monday to Friday is weekdays. If somebody asks you, create a collection of weekdays, so it will be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So tuples can be used to write or create those elements where we do not need to modify something. On the other hand, lists are used when we need to modify, or there is a scope of modification in the list wherein we might need to add something, right? For example, a recipe of something, right? In a recipe, you might need to change the recipe in the middle. Let's say you forgot to add some kind of ingredient, right? So you might need to add that ingredient, that step in the middle or at the end or at the start, right? So lists can be used to store these kind of things. Another example could be, let's say there is a list of student names or student roll numbers, right? We should not store that in a tuple. Why? Because we cannot add a new student if he or she gets enrolled, right? We should add that in a list. If you are very strict that, okay, after enrollment, we should not be adding any other student, then yeah, use tuple. But usually in real life, that's not the case, right? There can be someone leaving the school or from that class in the middle, or we might need to add a new student in the class. So you should use lists in these scenarios, not tuples, right? So let's take some examples and we'll come back to these differences. So let's say I create T1. And another similarity is any data type can be used as an element or an item of a tuple. So it could be a string, an integer, a float, a boolean, none, a list itself, right? And a tuple itself. Tuple can be an element of a tuple itself. A list can be an element of a tuple. Boolean, none, we have not entered it, but none can be. Integer and string. Basically, all the data types can be items or elements of the tuple. We can have any data type in the tuple as an element. Okay. Now, if I print T1, let's see. Let's run quickly. Tuple intro. These are the elements, right? Round bracket. Now, len function can be used to find out the length of the tuple, or in other words, number of elements of the tuple, right? You can simply do len, bracket closed. I can use shift F10 now, and I'll get 6. There are 6 items or 6 elements in this tuple, right? 1, Python, 2, 3, 4. This list is 5th and this tuple itself is 6th, right? We should not count these elements one by one, right? Because this is what an element is. Now, inside this list, there are 3 elements. Inside this tuple, we have 2 elements, right? We should not count these as individual elements, right? Because this whole thing is an entity, is an element or an item, right? So len function will give us the length of the tuple. How to access the elements of a tuple? Same as lists. Indexing. Indexing starts from 0, goes till length minus 1. And negative indexing starts from right to left from minus 1 to minus length. Same as strings and lists. So let's quickly print T1 of 0. Print T1 of minus 1. So what will be the output of T1 of 0? It will be Python. And what will be the output of T1 of minus 1? Pause the video and maybe write it down or think. It will be this entire tuple, 10, 20, right? That's the last element. Let's run this. So the 6 is coming as the length. Python is the first element, T1 of 0. And 10, 20 is the last element, T1 of minus 1. This is how we can access the elements of our tuple using indexing. So if indexing is same, slicing also will be same. The slicing in lists and slicing in tuples are same, having the same syntax, basically. Maybe you can try it on your own, right? Because you already have seen slicing twice, once in strings and once in list. So if you've understood how to do slicing in lists, it's exactly the same in tuples as well, right? Now this was a way to create tuples. Let's see another example how to create a tuple. Now this is a way we can create a tuple. Now you'll say, hey, why this is a tuple? Can this be a list? Before this, let's do this. Print the type of T1 to see what it gives, right? How tuples are represented as data types in Python. So let me run this. It's tuple T small, right? T lowercase. All of them are lowercase, T-U-P-L-E. Right? Now, if I remove this brackets here, I did say that it's a tuple, right? What do you mean by that? Why is it a tuple? Why is it not a list? Right? Let's run this. If you run this and we see the output, it could be a tuple, it could be a list. I might be wrong here, right? So how to find what is the data type? Type function. Right? So let's run this. Let me just change something here so that it reflects in the output. So we understand that, okay, we have just run it. So 10. See the output in the line number 5. Do we have the round brackets? We don't. But when we print, round brackets automatically, magically comes into picture. And when we check the type of T1, it is tuple. Right? So what is the meaning of this? The sequence of items as a collection, comma separated elements enclosed within parenthesis, and this parenthesis is optional. If you do not give the parenthesis, it is not a list, it is a tuple. So tuples can be created without the parenthesis as well. Right? This is an optional thing. You have to remember this. Right? Don't get confused. Now, if I create L1, what is this? Is this a tuple or a list? It's a list. This is how lists are represented. LIST small. You check the type of L1. Now, can we do something to this list to make it a tuple? The answer is yes. Can you think of a concept in which we can do this? We have a hint is we have done this in the earlier lectures. If you're thinking of typecasting, that's the correct answer. Right? So, what do I mean? If I want to convert any data type into another data type, how do I do it? Couple of L1. And we can store it in T1. Print T1. Print the type of T1. What I'll do here is I'll print L1 as well, along with the type of it. Or let me do one thing. Let me print it here itself. L1, type of L1, and T1, type of T1, right? Comma. We get it in the same line, right? So shift F10. Square bracket 1, 2, 3 is a list. And in line number 7, if you see, what we are doing is we are typecasting. We are converting the L1 to a tuple and we are storing it in T1. If you remember the concept of typecasting, the existing values are not changed, right? We get a new value, which is a tuple, and we store it in T1 and that is printed. Print L1 and see whether it has changed or not. What will be the output? It will be still a list. So L1 does not change. Typecasting does not mean that existing value will change. No, it will give a new value itself. And we are storing it in T1. We are printing it and we are checking the type of it. That is tuple. It can work in a reverse way as well, right? The tuple can be converted into a list. Right? Any tuple can be converted into a list by using typecasting. So let's say I have a tuple T1. Or let's create something called fruits. Okay, fruits, mango, orange, apple. What is fruits? Fruits is a tuple. right? Can we convert it into a list? Yes, we can, right? So list in after list in round brackets, write fruits. Now we can store it in a different variable, or we can use the same variable name here. Now what will happen? What's the difference between this and the previous example? In the previous example, we used different variables, right? We had L1 and we typecasted L1 using the tuple. Using that, we are storing it in T1, a new variable. But here we are using the same variable to store. So in this case, fruits will be overwritten. This is reassignment. This is called reassignment. So first, this fruit will be typecasted to a list. We'll get a new value with square brackets with the same values, mango, orange, and apple. And then it will be stored in fruits. Fruit has a tuple already, but this is a reassignment syntax by which this list will be stored in the fruits variable now, right? And this will be lost. Okay. And we can check the type of fruits now after this. So initially it was a tuple, see, in line number 6, and in line number 8, the output says it is a list. Okay. So if we are changing, if you want to change the same variable itself, typecast it and put it in the same variable, right? And now we can use the append function. Let's say the use case is we want to add new fruits to the list, to this tuple. Can we do that? No, we can't. We can't use any append function or insert function. There is no modification like that can be done on a tuple. But if there is a requirement and the values are in a tuple, we can first typecast into a list and then use that to append it, maybe, right? So this is this was a video or lecture on introducing tuples to you. We'll continue by looking at what operations that we can perform on tuples and what are the other things that we can do with tuples in the next lecture. See you there.